Hi everyone, it's Ren here. Welcome to my room, guys. Happy Sunday. Today, I want to take a moment to talk to you about, again, the way that INFJs speak, the question of eloquence in INFJs, the question of rambling in INFJs. We'll see that this is an important topic. The question of the thought process of INFJs and of different INFJ styles of articulating, speaking and articulating, because there are different styles, and what approach is the best, depending on context and perhaps in general as well. Because as I will try to explain to you, the answer to this is actually not quite as straightforward as you think. And in fact, yesterday I released a video about NI and SI as a way to figure out whether you are an INFJ or more an SI user of some kind, anywhere from ISFJ to ENTP, going through ENFP, INTP, and so on. But in fact, the question of how you speak can really be a big giveaway also of whether you're an INFJ or not. The manner in which you speak. There are subcategories, subspecies of INFJ speech, but there's always going to be recognizable traits between them. And this is what we want to be looking at. And again, how this relates to thought process, because I think this is important. And even to a certain degree, the question of authenticity in a person. Before I move on, speaking of INFJs, don't forget that I have written this book that just came out. Well, it's been 3 weeks now, something like that this been out. Well, the paperback for about 2 weeks. The Infinite Soul. It's a sequel to the Ecstatic Soul. A new look at the INFJ personality. This one's called INFJ Life in the Modern World. You can see that there's prequel and sequel. The two together, man and woman, a perfect union. This looks at INFJ consciousness in depth, right? If you want the deepest understanding of the INFJ consciousness, read this book, The Ecstatic Soul. Links are all below if you want to get the book on Amazon. This book, also partly responding to strong interest from my readers, looks at, the situation of INFJs in our world today and discusses questions of how to reach fulfillment, happiness, meaningfulness, purposefulness, and what the philosopher Charles Taylor calls highly valued goods, right? INFJs have a particular way of appreciating those and finding meaning in the world through those. If you want a deep dive into those challenges, get this book. And you can support me on Patreon, by the way. It's also down below, and it really supports me, so I thank you very much. Current supporters, past supporters, future supporters, thank you so much. Now, coming back to this question of articulation, speaking, presenting, being or not being eloquent, rambling, right? I'd like to offer some thoughts here on the question of NI dominance, right? Because I want to include INTJs in this as well, and this might surprise some people, but it has to be done, and you'll see why I'm doing this. The function of eloquence, right? If we had to name a function of eloquence, somewhat of a simplification, but it's largely true from experience. We're speaking about speech eloquence, right? Not because in fact, sometimes people say, oh, like when you express yourself in writing on Discord, sometimes you may be called eloquent, you articulate things well, but I'm talking about speech eloquence in speaking. The function of eloquence is JE, okay? So that's TE and FE. So there's two functions of eloquence, which are, in a sense, not reconcilable expressions of a deeper sense of, or deeper function of extroverted judgment, which makes perfect sense because the function of extroverted judgment is the function of presentation. It's when you articulate, justify, present an already articulated proposition to the external world, right? So it's the J is all about the ability to bring, if you like, the formed thought contents that you have in your mind, the ability to take those contents and give them a shape that once it comes out of your mouth will be striking and memorable in the eyes of your listeners, in the ears of your listeners. So it's an ability to shape your thought contents, to articulate them with the greatest effect, right? And the TE approach, like Ben Shapiro would be a really good example of a dominant TE approach. Is it's rapid fire. It is certainly extremely articulate, but you also have something like the Barack Obama approach, or there's a Martin Luther King approach, which is just as eloquent, but it places more emotion and affect and reading of the room in the way of projecting the eloquence. So you have an example of T eloquence and FE eloquence, right? So these functions are they're the core functions for speech eloquence. If you don't have those functions well integrated, the chances are that you're not very speech eloquent, okay? Again, I'm not talking about text eloquence, I'm talking about speech eloquence. So you need those functions, which explains why ENTJs and ENFJs tend to be, on average, the most eloquent types. You can even apply that to ESFJs and ESTJs, although maybe that is a debate for another day. I'd say that some of you would disagree, but let's say ENTJs and ENFJs for now to keep things simple. So going back to INTJs and INFJs, what's your first observation here? Well, obviously your first observation is INFJs have auxiliary FE and INTJs have auxiliary TE. So it's very tempting, in fact it's, I think, logical and reasonable to say that the more developed the FE in the INFJ and the more developed the TE in the INTJ, the more likely the person, when they speak, will have eloquent articulacy. Right? We could go into detail, but let's not necessarily go into much detail because this suffices for our purposes. So note something. You can be an absolutely brilliant INFJ. Everybody will know cases like those, who's, let's say, very strongly developed on NI and TI and represses FE for X reasons. Could be autism, could be something utterly unrelated to autism. That person will not be eloquent despite their utter brilliance. In the very same way, someone could be deeply eloquent, right? It happens all the time. We see that on TV a lot, but we even see that on YouTube content, for YouTube content producers a lot. Someone could be highly eloquent in speech eloquence, covering up an absolute bloody desert of thought. No single original idea, in fact, almost no idea. Nothing. It's like the thought, the thinking is as shallow as it gets. And yet the words are really eloquent, right? That can happen sometimes when someone is very developed in JE, right? Because JE is excellent at doing these things, but really undeveloped along every other functional dimension. That can happen that way. It's usually the phenomenon of, very nice dressing and very nice kind of garments covering up pure emptiness. Right? And it's interesting because INFJs and INTJs, because again, don't exclude INTJs from this, many of them will experience a somewhat opposite issue. And I'll tell you what, this also happens to INFJs and INTJs who in fact do have well-developed JE, so well-developed TE or well-developed FE. These INFJs are INFJs who are capable of eloquence, speech eloquence. Remember, that's what we're talking about. These guys or these women will always be text eloquence. In fact, NI is text eloquence. If JE comes in support of it, it will help it be even more eloquent, text eloquent. But for speech eloquence, NI is not that useful. It's really JE that's useful. So FE or T. And those INFJs that in fact do have well integrated FE, they face a conundrum. Particularly if they decide to start a YouTube channel or to become a sort of public figure when they are in a presenting mode, facing an audience at some level or another. What is this conundrum? Well, this conundrum is this. They are capable of being very eloquent, but they're also aware of the fact that in some sense, the more eloquent they are, the more of a premium they put on the function of eloquence, which is Fe, the more this might come at the expense of Ni. So you're in a sense drawing Ni back, putting Ni in the background a little bit. You're allowing it to play second fiddle to the function of eloquence. This is very tempting and brings fruit when it comes to maybe aggregating an audience, getting people to pay attention to what you're saying, getting views, knowing that a lot of people on YouTube can consume content that is striking and catchy without caring too much whether it's profound, right? That's the harsh reality of content producers who really focus on depth more than on shine, right? Is that they're going to face a lot of disinterest from a lot of people who are not interested in these things. So the INFJ who has highly developed Fe faces this conundrum that they can probably find a way of producing content that is very attractive to audiences that are going to be swayed by eloquence and articulation and nicely presented categories and stuff. But they know that this might come at the cost of their originality of thought, which is why at the very start of this video I talked about thought process. Because the thought processes that you have in there, the originality of those, they're going to be mostly modulated by your Ni function. They're going to be modulated by your Ni function because Ni is a function that has a highly subjective character that is likely to play the role of an arena where interesting new thoughts developed by yourself will come out, but also simply because it's your dominant function. And when a function is your dominant, that function is the one that is the most individualized for you by virtue of being dominant. And therefore, if you allow it to be repressed by a more auxiliary function or less prominent function, in a sense, you're going to be a little bit disconnected from this individuality and you're going to become less original. It's inevitable. So the price to pay for a slight repression of Ni in favor of high articulation and eloquence is usually a loss in profundity, right? Or the opportunity of profundity, thought-provokingness, and creativity and originality. And that's the fine line that a lot of INFJs and INTJs have to deal with. It's very present in their lives. In some sense, this is something that I often get in comments, because I regularly get comments that tell me the following, leaving aside the mostly overwhelmingly positive comments, when I get less positive comments or straight negative comments, they will usually say, this was so meandering, so rambling, I don't know what the point was, and I got lost, and I feel like I listened to nothing, right? So that usually would be the reaction of someone who's looking for eloquence as a premium, as the most important thing. Looking for the transparent articulation of thoughts. And the idea here that with INFJs, at least some INFJs, maybe like myself, this transparency is not obvious. Well, in this book, and I know some of you have already finished it, you will know that there's a chapter where I talk precisely about this ideal of transparency. And I say this is actually not congruent with INFJ genius. The utmost INFJ genius speaks the language of introvert intuition, the language of the archetypes. Introvert intuition is a circle, always comes back to the archetypes and goes, and heads on its own and then circles back, and it's always bringing in new insights, new interesting perspectives. It's building a world and it's bringing new nuance and color to it, so potentially profound contributions. But the way in which it manifests itself, the way in which it develops and progresses, is not linear, number one, and it's not transparent because it's so heavily symbolic that the translation from the thought to the expression can't be just one-to-one transparent. That's an ideal that some people have. They think that all people function like that, work like that. It's just not true. And an INFJ, unique individuality, if you want to express that, you're going to have to inevitably face the reality of rambling. And you face the inevitability of rambling, because rambling, unfortunately for a lot of people, is the way that INFJ arrives at their most profound insights. Because rambling is actually just the outward manifestation of the particular geography of their inner mind. That's how it works. So the more you want to remain faithful and authentic to your NI, the more this is how it will come out. Finding a happy compromise between the demands of authenticity and your creativity, if that's what you care about, and communicating with your audience in a way that also does not put them off too much, it's an everyday struggle, and it's worth it. But this is something that is going to be very much part of the everyday of an INFJ and an INTJ, and if you don't experience that, you're almost certainly not either INFJ or INTJ. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you thought. Give me a like and good reviews to this book if you loved it. See you soon. Bye-bye.